So I think the way that we're going to start this talk is each person is going to kind of give a background on themselves and kind of where they've how they've gotten to where they've ended up now.
I'm Olive. I'm currently a creative director at Versed, which is a skincare brand we sell at Target and Walmart. Currently, my background is in art direction in fashion and beauty, so a lot of that being photography, but as a creative director, I also work in packaging, marketing, and graphic design. So kind of like a broad role and a broad skill set. Background is actually in engineering. So I have a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from MIT. So I'll talk throughout the session a little bit about transitioning from like a different degree into a creative background. So you'll hear more about that.
Coming from a STEM background, like with engineering, especially at like a school like MIT, like how did it feel to sort of graduate, and then what kind of led you to want to pursue a creative role?
Yeah, so I kind of started transitioning slowly in school. So I kind of went from mechanical engineering to product design to design research to graphic design. And so in school, I was kind of already finding internships that were interesting to me. So UX, UI design, graphic design, photography. So I was building up that portfolio. That being said, I feel like after graduation, you have just like so many unknowns in your life and it's so scary. So I definitely spent like a year trying to figure out what I wanted to do. My plan was to do like a bunch of internships in like a lot of different areas. So I did one internship in design research. I worked at the city of Boston. Then I did a marketing internship. And that was all like during COVID. And after two internships, I was like, you know what? I think I want to try doing this creative thing. And it was definitely a huge leap of faith and very, very scary. And I guess that's like a kind of a lesson maybe for y'all. Like it is just going to be scary and you are going to cry and like wonder if you're doing the right thing. But that's kind of part of the journey. And I went through that too. And now I have a job in the industry. So hopefully that is reassuring.
Do you remember how it felt when, I guess, maybe comparing to yourself to people who you surrounded yourself in college, and like how it felt to kind of, I guess, separate from the pack of what's like normal?
Like a technical school, a lot of people just have their job set up in like September of senior year. And so I was definitely comparing myself to other people. How did it feel? Isolating. I think like finding community in the art world in Boston really helped. So just finding those connections, like through something like Fellows Collective. I was part of art collectives in Boston. So having people to look up to who were in careers that I really admired and wanted really helped because that helped me feel a little bit less alone.
Maybe we'll move on to Chet. I think similarly, like starting out in a different background, maybe your more typical art lifestyle.
I'm Chet. Currently, right now, I'm doing freelance work in just like a range of like any production set jobs, but I'm also um, doing production and like general business management for a company called Ends of Magazine that I'm an owner of that we've been operating for about 2 years now, both with and without funding at various levels. So it's that in and of itself has been like one of the more interesting rides and how I actually ended up coming to New York from LA and be super interested in going into that. But I think like just as like a background, like my creative stuff has always been like a hobby-based thing. Like I went to school for music, like, and then that like kind of introduced me to like a bunch of different artist friends, and then they were doing like concerts, and I wanted to like be a part of it. So then we threw them together, and then that led me into like event space, and then the event space led me into like doing admin work for like I got an internship at a studio, and then that got me to like studio management, and it's like everything kind of like bounces back and forth, and like I never knew from the beginning that like, oh, I like video production, I like working with my hands, I like all this other stuff. But just kind of through throwing enough attempts at the wall, um, I kind of have figured out the path that generally I think I feel good about creatively, day to day, and like definitely have also worked corporate jobs and like salary jobs where it's like the creative is less fun. So would be really interested talking about that with the other people on the call today, because I feel like that is another aspect to like making this your lifestyle that like I feel like a lot of people don't really have a long-term conversation over, because it's just like you kind of burn out if you burn out. So that's a very chaotic way to say I work creatively.
I remember you went to school for a bit for college and then you ended up leaving. What was that experience kind of like? And I guess when were you kind of like, oh, maybe I should pursue the creative side?
I think leaving, so I was like at an arts high school, and I think that that was definitely a privilege in the sense that like I was around a large group of people who had creative passions, and that isn't like super common in like normal adult spaces. So kind of leaving that, I was like, I don't want to do arts anymore. It was too traumatizing. I don't want to do any of this anymore. I'm gonna go to Hawaii. I'm gonna be a nurse, and then I don't need to. It's okay. I wasn't good at jazz, whatever. And then I like was doing my whole nursing thing, and then I got to my first dissection, and it was like, oh no, this is not who I'm supposed to be or what I like. Um, and it really did just push me to like the. It timed out with COVID that I had to come home. But after a year of that, I kind of realized that like spending time doing schoolwork at like a place very far removed from like the city that I am from, acknowledge like privilege that I have like family and like a place to stay in a city with opportunity. I just figured that it was a better use of my time if I was going to be like grinding and grinding at something. I'd rather it be something that I kind of believe in versus like, oh, I'm just kind of figuring out a degree. And that was like less interesting, especially over Zoom in college. So
Mm.
I think it was just like a circumstantial push, but I probably would have made the same decision anyway.
Without like having a college degree, especially like in art or anything that you're pursuing now, like how do you feel about your position when you're applying to stuff or like trying to get gigs, like without having like a college degree on your resume?
I do think like as I'm continuing to apply to like general longer term positions, I think it is a separation. It truly is. Like I can't say that it's not worth anything, because there's a lot of jobs that, even though you and I have very similar like technical skill backgrounds and stuff, like you're able to apply and be considered for something that I'm not. Um, However, I think that it's more of a volume question than anything, because once you're in the door, you can really make your impression. But when you're applying, it's kind of a blank slate. So as long as you can get anything in, I think it's better than, not trying at all.
Cool. I kind of want to move on to Cece.
Right now, I'm a little bit different from the rest of our speakers here because I'm still a student. I'm a sophomore at USC pursuing a bachelor's in film and television production. And as for my background, I got into film production when in sixth grade when my teacher just happened to write a grant for a program to start teaching us how to film, basically on iPads and using iMovies and stuff like that. And so it was a hobby growing up for the majority of my childhood. It's just something I've always pursued. And when it came time to apply for college and choose a major, it was just kind of like a no-brainer for me. And yeah, being a student and also trying to find creative opportunities has been amazing. And I think that um, something I really learned at USC is just people.
Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe some previous career experiences you've had so far, such as like internships or maybe like your own projects that you're working on and stuff like that?
One of my most recent internships has actually been in conjunction with the Television Academy, so like the Emmys and Walt Disney. And that was a really amazing experience. It was kind of like a joint collaboration between the two organizations, and that was in production management specifically. So while I was at Disney, I it was during the writer strike and the SAG after strike, unfortunately. So there wasn't a ton of production going on, but I got to really see how a huge company like Disney, like that's just so big and so different from kind of the smaller student productions I've been on, organizes their productions and how their workflow works. And I think like one of the biggest takeaways was that it's like not that different. Like a lot of the core kind of values of like being organized, like having clear communication, they all exist at the upper level too. So yeah, that was a really fun experience and I'm really excited to get into that.
how do you find the creative opportunities or experiences that you've had in the past? Like, do you use LinkedIn or career sites, or where do you find yourself kind of glancing through?
So it's kind of a handful. I think for the two major like full-time employment opportunities I've found, one has been through LinkedIn and the other has been through a personal network. And that is one of the things about being a creative that I guess like might be different than other jobs, but I mean I feel like it's the same in every industry. But my first job was through like the Boston Creative Network. I was talking to people, doing creative projects with people. And I had a friend who was stepping down from her current role and looking for her replacement. And she kind of pointed at me. So it was a really, really wonderful opportunity. With LinkedIn, the one thing I would say is it really requires that professional portfolio that is extremely catered to the role. So for like more exploratory opportunities, I would say word of mouth. And then for something that is like more corporate, that's definitely something you'll find out.
I have two parts. It's called be outside and then always work on your own stuff. Because if you're not outside, you can't tell anyone what you're working on. But if you're outside, but you're not working on your own stuff, then you're just not interesting. I'm sorry. Like that's like it's like you don't have the thing to talk about. Otherwise, then you just kind of do the small talk on sets and you don't really get to know anyone or like what they like or and it's kind of like just the oh, Clark is testing me. It's kind of just the ability to do both because in real life, I don't think you're ever gonna like have 3 weeks to be able to like work on your own thing and like get it done. And like it's always gonna be a battle. And I think the hard part is actually figuring it out over a time period, but you have to do that over like years kind of to kind of figure out what your voice is and see other people's work at the same time. And then it's like a bouncing kind of thing. But yeah, be outside and work on your own stuff.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with everything that Olive and Chet said too. I think for me, coming from someone who doesn't necessarily have all of that experience like on LinkedIn just yet, I really took advantage of people that like I would cold message people on LinkedIn and just ask to learn about like, coffee chat them, just ask to learn about their journey. And I think creative opportunities don't necessarily have to be in the form of jobs or, like things that you could put on a resume. And I really learned a lot from just talking to people and learning about what they did. I also think that one thing that I really value in myself is that if I'm on a set, for example, because if I'm in film, I always treat it as my job application for the next time. Because coming from someone who's also trying to crew up on their own projects and always looking for people to also help me out, like I think that there's so much value in how you carry yourself and how you how you carry yourself even when that opportunity is not necessarily like a job or
Cool. Yeah. I feel like you guys all sort of touched on the fact that you have to talk to people and like form like those relationships and connections. I guess as a follow-up question, like how do you feel about making those sort of more networky kind of connections and like where the line is between trying to create like a new friendship or a new like relationship in more like a friendship way versus something that is more career oriented?
I,
Like chat
I feel like
people.
I have a good anecdote from today. Um,
Mm,
so just for context, I got called onto a corporate gig, just for like tech directing, like plugging in stuff. But I got the gig because I just went to a theater show that I like kind of wanted to see, and then someone that I knew was also just like, oh, let's go to a bar after, and then enough people went there, and then we talked to people, and then like got into interests and stuff, and then eventually I kind of got connected with this guy who was like doing, live event production for certain things, and like I don't know, just kind of sat and waited, but then followed him. And it's like a couple weeks later, he was like, oh, I need 6 roles for this upcoming shoot. And then I applied to 3 of them, and then I got one of them. So it's like kind of just like it's not like you are looking for like a professional thing, but I think starting conversations from genuine interest, like going to events or like things that like actively represent the things you like, is a really great way to like kind of get involved into a network of people who are already working on stuff that, they like.
I feel like it's not necessarily one or the other. I think in my mind, like making art together, this is kind of corny, but I'm just like sensitive, corny person. Like in my mind, making art together is something that's inherently vulnerable and inherently emotional and like tied to who you are as a person. So I think working creatively with someone has to be personal in that way and has to form, you have to maybe like have that personal connection to work on something you're passionate about with someone. And I think the friendships that I have from the creative industry came really naturally. I didn't feel like I pushed it. I think, I mean, Ali and I, like, we are friends now. And I think it came naturally. Like, I don't think it was because we were like creatively connected. I think we also had things in common and we met one way and it kind of developed into something else.
Yeah, sorry I keep like switching locations. I feel like I'm teleporting. Yeah, more on that. I think I totally agree. Like making art is a very personal connection. And oftentimes like the most common area, like place where I meet people is probably on set. And I think that like as long as you sort of look at it as making friends as opposed to, using someone or like climbing some sort of ladder, I think that definitely takes down that barrier of like, oh, I have to meet this person, I have to gain something from them. It's like, no, like you are just coming together to make something wonderful and creative. And I think at the end of the day, that puts you in a place where you're genuine when you're meeting them. And also, I think that also, if you come at it with that mindset, you'll gain the most out of that relationship because you won't just be making a professional connection. You'll be making someone you can personally relate to and personally count on too.
Have you ever had an unpaid creative opportunity? And what are your thoughts on spending time on those opportunities, gigs, or internships that don't provide compensation? Is it worth it, or maybe it's not worth it, or what are your experiences and thoughts?
I can go first because right now the majority of my opportunities are unpaid as a student. And I think that, even though I'm not necessarily gaining anything financially, being financially compensated, I think it's so important at this stage in my life, at least, that I recognize like, oh, I'm here to learn. Like that's the real value that I'm taking from this opportunity. And I think regardless of what happens, again, I think meeting people, as everyone has touched on, has been just so important to, finding ground, beginning a creative industry, creating a creative career. And I think just working with people, being on that 12 hour 12 set is just, it bonds people in a way that I think no other experience of mine could have. And yeah, I think there's so much information and so much value in unpaid opportunities. And I'm confident that if someone keeps taking those opportunities, that paid opportunities will eventually come by. So yeah.
To piggyback off of that too, it also is interesting too, once you start doing gigs past like the like expectation for experience, because after like the sixth gig where I was like camera opping or whatever, it was like, okay, I know how to physically do this, and it like wasn't as like, oh, I'd like to prove this to myself that this is what I want to do, or like this is something that I can do. It turned more into like, what is it creatively do I want to be outputting, and like what voice do I like have inside that I feel like other people can resonate with. Like honestly, most of the work that I do for the Enzo thing is uncompensated. We break even on everything, but in the essence of it's the thing we gain is actually getting to pull off the event, or like, gather the community around something like that. I think has so much more value than like financial, to me at least.
I have something to say that is a little bit contrary to like what the people before me said, but I guess as part of a panel, that's like the benefit. You get to hear all the voices and like have all the opinions in context. I would say that if you are working for a company that is like selling products or making money, you should definitely be getting paid. And if you were working on a passion project with your friends, I would say it's okay to not be paid. But for example, like at like right now, if I was like working on a passion project and asking my friends to help me, I'd be like, oh yeah, like I'll buy you dinner, or like here's $100, like pay you very low. But I would just be cautious because like the creative industry is an industry that there is a lot of unpaid work, and um you can turn unpaid work into a career, but a career usually means like you're getting paid for something. And so to like spend your time wisely, um, and also like a company that if like someone who's offering you an unpaid opportunity, like think about what that means for them, right? That means like they either don't have enough money, which is very fair, or they don't think your work is valuable, like worth money, which is like a huge warning sign for them and might mean like you shouldn't work with them in the future. So my takeaway is be protective of yourself. And if you are taking those gigs, every gig, whether it's paid or unpaid, you should be thinking, how much can I get out of this? Like, what am I profiting? What am I learning? Get as much as you can out of every opportunity.
But yeah, I feel like that's the perfect segue into the next question about like, do you have any tips or based on your experience, like how do you gain the most out of like an experience, a creative experience, whether it's paid or unpaid?
Instagram, straight up. Just like do the like weird little song and dance of like, can can I let me can we swap? Because it like genuinely, it's like the lowest bar of interaction with a person, but then they do need something every once in a while that they have to like ask people for. And it's like, you know, there's a general low stakes to that. Like you go outside, you give them an Instagram, and then you're on a radar. And then as if you do that enough times, like eventually the momentum actually starts to pick up.
There's two sides of this, I think, for me, my internship experience and also just being on set of quite a few times. Um, with my internship, everyone tells you like, okay, I was specifically talking about my most recent one at Disney. It was kind of the first big girl internship I would say I've had. A lot of my other internships have been during COVID or like very much less formal than a big corporation was. And I was very like, I don't know, it was my first time. There was no other interns on my floor. No one there was like more towards my age. All of them could be my parents. So I was very like, it was definitely a different environment that I had never really been exposed to before. And I think one one thing I wish I'd done earlier was just, I knew I had to ask, I knew I had to talk to people and ask people questions, but I never realized that other people can connect you with other people. So I really wish I'd reached out to my supervisor earlier and was like, oh, like I'm interested in X department. Do you know anyone in this department that I could potentially talk to and ask about? And I only did that like I only just came up with that the last week of my internship. And I was like, just punching myself, like, why did I think of that at the very beginning? But that's something that, regardless of where you are, if that's on set or like if you're at an agency or a company, I think making connections and making friends, but also asking them for like what they feel. Because I've had people ask me like, oh, can you connect me with X? And I feel like, of course, like I think I like everyone wants to be in a position where they can help someone. So I really wish I did that earlier. And to piggyback off Chet, like the Instagram thing is a thing. Like at the end of the day, everyone just kind of like switch phones. I think that is really effective. So just keeping in touch with everyone and just making sure you're liking their stories or just like being a person to them still, and that connection doesn't die. I think it's really important.
Thank you, email. It
Yes.
seems
Oh,
gratuitous, but like it just lets them know that you want to do one extra step, and that's never a bad thing.
do you have any advice for how to find creative experiences outside of like what you can access like through school or immediately through like LinkedIn? Like what are some more unique ways to get creative when you don't have access to like specific?
I feel like we've talked a lot about like making friends externally and at events that you can find on Instagram, stuff like that. I will say one thing that I didn't realize until I was in college. I saw someone like leading a project and like doing it, and I was like, oh, like I can just do things. Like if I dream of something, I can do it. And that's something that I did not realize until college. And I don't know why it never came to me. So like if you have something you're like, it would really be cool to, I don't know, like learn how to direct a film. Just try to direct a film. Like being bad is a necessary step to being good. And like you can do those things on your own, find friends to do those things. So if you're having trouble finding those creative experiences, I would encourage you to look within yourself and like try to do something and start it by yourself.
Yeah, I think it's doing it, but like badly, like doing it with one or two people and like really trying to figure it out. Because honestly, like the hardest thing is like figuring it out an idea after it's not panning out the way that you thought it was going to be. Because that kind of shows your character as a person, like when you have that conflict of like, oh fuck, like plan C didn't pull through. What happens? And like you can't just like I mean, for a lot of the work I did, like I'm not gonna get fired over that. Like I'm gonna figure something out. Like when it comes to that kind of level of like severity, I think it lets you kind of just put the pedal to the metal and figure something out.
I totally agree. I think like I recently just launched a Kickstarter for my short film that I'm currently making right now. And, I think like whenever you're starting a project, it can be easy to get caught up, at least in my experience, it can be easy to get caught up with like, oh, wait, I can't start this because I need to have X ready. I need to have this figured out first. And I spent so much time, I think I spent a lot of time like using that as like, oh, like I'll put it off, right? But I think when it comes down to it, you just have to get into the mindset like, yeah, it's gonna happen, and I'm gonna get from point A to point B, and like whatever, you just have to get in that mindset. Like, if I need X, like, well, let's make X happen. And I think that's kind of the hardest part, for me at least, in beginning something else, because I know like we all want our projects to be good, and we have to realize that at some point we just have to begin, and we'll see where it takes us. So yeah. I think the question, what was the question again, Ali? I think I was just wanting to add on to what they said.
Oh yeah, yeah. The question was, how do you or any advice on finding creative experiences outside of school?
Oh, like unconventionally.
Hmm.
Um, I think one thing that I did was pretty unconventional, at least for the short film that I'm working on. I reached back out to like my hometown, and like if I grew up in like not in LA, kind of an area where creative people are not, like, it was not necessary. It was not in like an artsy town. It was not the emphasis. And I never realized how much support I could get just from reaching back out to my old high school teachers, and how utilizing those connections that are really personal because I grew up with a lot of them. So I would say, I guess that's kind of unconventional. Just utilizing relationships from even my childhood. I think everyone has something to contribute.
Okay, well, on that note, I think we're going to start moving into the Q&A section.
Vanessa wanted to ask just for advice on transitioning to New York and job searching in general.
Chet and I can literally both speak to that because we are both job searching in New
Yeah.
York.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing is we both came out here with like a pretty good like job ramp. Like, oh, here's benefits, here's a salary, here's an like assured living like setup or whatever. And then we found out we were getting massively undervalued for what that was. And that doesn't feel good after a long time. Like I was there for over a year. Um, and it just there was no like talk about raise or any kind of like, you know, general crewment of like a pat on the back in any kind of like compensation way. So uh in the sense of you can make your way out here through any channel, but honestly, it's finding things once you're out here is kind of the same deal as if you're trying to find stuff in LA. Like it's going on like Mandy.com or like staffmeup.com every day and looking for like stupid reality show set gigs, but it's like, okay, you're gonna meet like two people who might be cool out of like 20, but it's like you meet two cool people. So
Yeah, I guess from like my point of view, like I did USC for college. I graduated. I moved straight out to New York and started my full-time big girl job. And I think creatively it like burned me out a lot. So now that I'm gone and I'm like freelancing and trying to like pay my rent every month, I think I'm put into a position where my expectations for New York was, oh, this is gonna like start my career, like really like begin my life. And now that my life is kind of not upside down, but just like it's changed a lot changed a lot since my expectations of what it was gonna look like. And I feel like now I don't have an answer to like how I should lead my life in New York, but I do know that slowing down is like has been very helpful, and just like chasing the things that I really love to do and like refinding my creativity has been my priority. As well as like finding gigs, which I guess is, that's like just how it is being a freelancer. But I guess in New York specifically, I think people move because they have this expectation that everything's gonna like start because there's so much stuff to do here. And maybe they're worried about it moving really fast, or like it's just like overwhelming. But I think for me, my biggest challenge is just like reminding myself that going slow is okay, and that I'm also just 23, and I have so much more to go. So yeah, there's really no rush.
So I asked how to make connections post-grad.
The same way that you would in school, by meeting people, by going to events. I moved out to LA and I didn't have any friends. And so it's kind of the same as making friends post grad. Find creative events that you would be interested in, go to coffee shops where you feel like the people dress the same as you, like, or dress how you want to dress. Like, go to those places and put yourself out there and say hi and just be ready to be socially anxious and like put yourself out there and shy. And it's really hard, but I believe in you. And if you're having a hard time, I see you, and I've been there and I understand it.
I'm gonna piggyback too, since I guess I'm also a post grad. But I think, not to like brag about Fellows Collective, but it's funny because when I moved out here, I also didn't have any friends, but I threw like one Fellows Collective event and made like a ton of friends. And I feel like from those friends, I met their friends, and then now I'm friends with their friends, and it's just been like a process of like hanging out with people consistently, and then just meeting the people that they also surround themselves with. Like, it's just been a cool way to like grow deeper relationships. Because at first, like, I'm a pretty socially anxious person, so going to events kind of scares me, especially if I don't know that many people. But I think it's just like start small and deep and then stretch from there, I guess.
Specifically for chat, Maria wanted to know what are some interesting or valuable things you've learned working at a magazine brand?
Some of the things that I've learned is that any group, organization, or whatever that you can like put together, that you can then channel everybody's energy towards like some form of product, whatever it is always worth doing, in my opinion. So my job started as like more on like the facilitation parts of the business, like getting a business license, or like doing the accounting and bookkeeping, or like making the rentals for everything that we need gear wise, or all these other things. But slowly, as like, it's become more and more my creative voice as well. Like more of the creative decisions have become easier to casually make. So I think over the last like 2 years, I've really shifted more from like operations focus to operations and creative inclined. So that has been a pretty interesting journey, because it definitely was like imposter syndrome to be like, ooh, do I have good enough ideas to write my own sketches? And it's like, yeah, probably. Or you don't. But you don't really know that until you spend 30 minutes and actively try to make something really good. And then if it doesn't pan out, eh. But if it does, like, that's something that happens when you apply yourself. And I think that that's kind of the thing that I've learned from Enzo the most, is like setting a goal that you think is actually too big to chew off, like making a magazine, throwing a film festival, applying to like a job that you have no reason applying for, like all of these things get you to a zone that you wouldn't otherwise like approach if you weren't pushed out of your comfort zone. So I think like try and bite big because like the worst thing that happens is that you kind of don't it's not awesome, but that's fine. Just there's another gig. There's always something tomorrow. That was the one rule. Sorry, I'm jumping between all. There's so much. I'm just thinking about creative work, and it's like the thing that I feel like I learned from what like just being in music industry for like the year that I was like the only way that you genuinely lose is if you give up, like if you stop doing it. Even if you do it at a lower level, you're still in it. Like it's still like valid. And I think that it's once you stop, it kind of loses its momentum. Sorry if I jumped way too much, but in general, I think really find people and other like creatives that have the similar voice with you and make whatever product it looks like. We call ourselves a magazine. We're not really a magazine. It's just good branding. um, and yeah.
Ask if you had any advice for specifically writing cover letters.
I guess I read cover letters and look at portfolios. And I've written a lot of cover letters. I guess like my experience is more corporate, so I don't know if any of y'all are like interested in that. But for my experience on the hiring end, we're looking like for very specific things. If a job description says we want someone who's designing marketing assets, we want someone who's like experienced in social first video, we want these things, we want someone who's like detail oriented, precise, like look at the bullets that they have in the job descriptions and write to that and write an example where you have done exactly that, because they are giving you the answer when they're posting their job description. They're telling you exactly what they want. And so if you can then provide that for them, that is a very effective cover letter.
Try and make sure that every sentence has an active voice. If you're gonna make someone read like a paragraph about you, it shouldn't kind of hint at things that you do or like know creatively. And just try not to do like I feel like I could do a good job. It's like I know that I could serve this role on your team. And here's the example at which that happened. Like it make it a little bit more equation based because yeah, like Olive was saying, like being on the other side of it, it really always comes down to a difference of like three people that like one person just aligns a little bit more. So if you can have like set that up for you in the first round or second round or whatever, like it helps in the end for sure.
Want to know your thoughts on the controversial idea of salaries versus sacrificing money for the pursuit of passion?
I would say I can only speak to kind of like the design, graphic design industry and less on the film side. But I would say that I think there's a huge stigma against creative work. But if you think about it, like every branded company needs like two designers, right? And they all need an art director and they all need a creative director. And I think right now, currently in like the industries that I'm in, these people are being paid fairly and being paid living wages. And so I'm not sure if there is as much of a trade-off as like I grew up believing when I was a kid and going into STEM, like the salaries like maybe a little bit less, but like relatively equivalent in the industries that I'm in. So
Yeah, just speaking on like more film, TV slash like social kind of world, I think it's a mentality of one for you, one for me is pretty good. You can be a part of like a weird corporate gig that's like 2 days and that's fine. But then if you work on your own short film, 3 out of the 7 days of the week, like that's why you do the other thing, you know? So you have the time to do that.
One thing that's really interesting that I learned from someone else, she took on like a more corporate job that was more like management, logistical based. And she did, and even though she was a very creative person, she was a novelist, she chose that job on purpose because she didn't want to burn out all her creativity at work. And so then she could go home and still have that creative juice to work on her own passion. So that was something that I really thought was valuable. Like there doesn't necessarily always have to be a payoff, because I think everyone's different, and like to each their own. Everyone has their own path, but I think there's definitely probably a way to balance that, whether that is taking a salaried position or working freelance.
I like this question a lot because I feel like I was literally in a position in my past job where I thought it was like my passion, and like I was like, this is like the most ideal job that I would ever want. Like I was doing branding slash marketing for a fashion company, and I was like the only person doing it. So I had a lot of control and a lot of creative vision. And over time I kind of realized like, wait, maybe this isn't my passion. Like maybe I like actually don't want to make things for other people, and I want to make things for myself. And working this job, although I thought it was what I wanted to do, like burned me out so much that I couldn't like pursue my own stuff anymore, which did leave or which caused me to decide to leave. So I guess it's kind of like I just want to add that your passion can also change, and that balance of passion and career can look different depending on what your priorities are or how like that balance looks like for you. I think it's just different for everyone.
One other thing that I thought about, sorry, that was great, Ali. Was I have one of my best friends like has changed his whole mentality towards all, like he's been working retail because he also is in the same boat as me degree wise. But he straight up, when people ask him like, do you want to be part of management or like do more of a role, he says no, because he doesn't want to work management at Phil's Coffee. And then that gives him a more of an ability to say no. And then what are they going to do? Fire someone who knows all of the recipes? No. So then you don't get scheduled quite as much as you would if you were trying hard, but like you have more time to go do photo or like do all this other stuff that like genuinely would help you get to another spot. Like I think that there's opportunities in your life that you can like fill a void of like, how am I progressing or whatever. But I think taking the chance to bet on yourself is always the better of two options.
Somebody asked if you had any favorite websites or just tips in general for making specifically a creative portfolio.
Mine is on like Squarespace, but like low key, I'm not a very like websitey person. I think that's just what works for me. So
I think it depends on industry. Like the more tactile jobs, I feel like don't require as much of a portfolio. Like it helps to have a CV just because it's easy to send that as a link. But like we're not like, in all this position where there's graphics and need to or like if you want to be a storyboard artist or whatever, there has to be like a level of like assuredness there. So it truly depends, and Squarespace or Wix is never a bad option.
Portfolios, I would say like it's really hard because as artists we have like so many passions, so many loves, so many interests, and we do so many different projects. And so I would say like organize or like either specify or organize, right? Like if you have graphics, put them in the graphics section. So when you're applying to a graphic designer, you can send them that link. Because if someone's hiring for a graphic designer and they click on your portfolio and you have like one graphic design, but you also have a lot of film, they're gonna be like, oh, like they could have more experience in graphic design. This is not what they do. This is not their bread and butter. And it's really, really sucks because like as a creative, you want to be multidisciplinary, and like there are jobs that allow for that, but a lot of the jobs that are out there, it's like they're looking for something specific. And again, like they're telling you the answer. I want someone who's worked in marketing assets. Put those marketing assets like on your portfolio, you know?
Yeah, okay. So someone else asked, how have you learned to balance your personal life and your creative work?
Messily. I've burnt out probably about 4 different times over the last 2 years at different levels. But it does give you confidence that a burnout doesn't mean it's the end of the road. It just means you need to stop the way that you're doing that thing. Um, and genuinely, there's a lot of like circumstantial things that occur that make that stress really like apparent. And like as soon as you change one operation in your daily life or like how you go about doing a creative thing, it I think it, you know, leads you to a 1% healthier lifestyle. And if you do that every day, it's pretty good.
I think the fact that you asked this question, I think it's Ava, shows that like this is something that's a priority in your life, right? Like maybe your number one priority is like being able to do art as a profession, but your number two priority is having a full life, right? Like, and your number three priority is like developing better relationships with your friends, you know, like you have to be a full person at the end of the day, like to feel content and go through life, and just like the desire to be a full person, which you have, and like just honor that and believe that that is good, and that you don't need to spend all your time working.
Do you guys have any advice for recent grads who don't know what they want to do yet or don't have a clear career direction?
Try everything. It's a buffet. It's not a menu. Like there's not a single day that defines you creatively. Like, and you will be able to point stuff back to it, but like I spent like an hour trying to figure out how I was gonna explain the background, and I genuinely still don't understand how to do that. So all it is just going outside. Because nobody's gonna like go like, what are you? Who are you? It's like that never happens.
Speaking from someone who's still in school, like when if like a lot of times, especially even now, I'm still trying to figure out which part of filmmaking that I'm interested in the most. And it's kind of my philosophy, like if I can do it feasibly and I'm not sacrificing anything, I'll say yes to any opportunity. As long as like it's within what I can feasibly take on and do well, or try to do well, do my very best. Like I think there's always opportunities to learn and really get a nice background of what every part is. And I think that's the most important part about finding what you really love.
So our last question of the night is, how do you navigate taking on a position that you feel you may not be good enough for?
I would say do it. I've been in so many positions where I was like, oh my God, I'm not qualified to do this. But like, you're not gonna learn if you don't push yourself out of your comfort zone. And oftentimes I've always felt like people you'll like with the right research, and if you really care about this project, I don't think there's any way that with like the amount of time that you're putting in or whatever that may be, I think that anyone can rise to the occasion. And I'm always an advocate for like doing things that you're scared of, because the worst thing that will come out of it is like, oh, it's not as great as you hoped. And I think that um then that's a learning experience for you to take on to the next project. I had a similar experience. I think I directed a film festival, and when I was approached with this, I was like, oh my God, like I don't know anything about this. I don't know the first step to directing a film festival. But you just have to kind of dive right in. And I was watching YouTube tutorials. I was on Reddit. I was doing the whole like texting thing, like, hi, can you help me out? I think just like that, but that experience, like walking away from that was like such a great learning experience. And I learned so much about myself and about working with other people. So, if nothing comes up at the end of the day, you'll have a great learning experience. And I think that's just the most important part.
I have one last anecdote. I feel like a lot of times whenever I do a job I haven't done before the night before, it always feels like the day before school starts, and you're like, oh no. Because, like, I don't know. I remember this one time before fourth grade, I was really stressed out because I did not learn how to divide in the year prior, even though we definitely went over it. And I was like, oh no, they're gonna know I don't know how to divide, and it's gonna be a really big problem. And then it's like, think about it. They're not going to kick you out for not knowing something in a job sense. They're not going to like blame you for not knowing something. But if you like can like listen and like actually just pick up the skills on the thing, that's the important part. Like it's not a matter of like how much preparation you have towards something. It's the improvisation that comes with like doing it in real life in front of another person. So,
Right.
I
think like, oh, sorry.
yeah, no, that was my little division anecdote.
Yeah, again, like I think like if you have a good attitude about it and you're not like, and you're open to learning and like asking questions and just being really positive, I think that people definitely pick up on that more than what you don't know. Like your positive skills would definitely be emphasized.
I would also say like imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people feel. Yes, do it. Yes, Google. Also, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Like maybe you can like it's so scary because like your boss, you want to set a great impression. So like maybe your coworkers, but maybe also your boss, like your boss hired you to develop you. A good boss is someone who's going to like train you and mentor you and love on you. So it's okay to be vulnerable and be like, hey, I feel like I don't have this skill that like maybe I need. Like, could we work on this together? Like put it in your like semi-annual review. Could I work on a project? Could I watch you do something? It's okay to like be vulnerable and to ask for help and to tell people where you feel like you're failing.
But yeah, that's gonna be all for tonight. Thank you so much for joining and for everyone being a part of it.
Thanks, guys.
Email me, DM me, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
anything at all.
If you have any questions.
Wait, yeah. Well, drop everyone's like if you go to our Instagram, you'll see everyone's Instagram, so you can like follow and stuff.